You're very welcome back to the show. Now, Halloween is a time we often associate with scary witches or in our own folklore. Creatures like Cailleach or Banshee, the Banshee.
What is that, Cailleach?
Cailleach, you said it.
Cailleach.
Cailleach on Eriget.
Yeah, Cailleach, yeah.
We had the Banshee, the Banshee.
Yeah. But I suppose witches, we talk about witches, were witches in folklore really? Were they really bad, as we often associate them, or were they simply powerful women who were given some very bad press from men folk? In order to answer all these is folklorist and a man, Shane Mahan. How are you, Shane? I don't put you in the same box as every other man because you're a folklorist and you know these things. Now, what's interesting with witches and Halloween, why do we associate witches with Halloween in the first place?
It's interesting, isn't it? We come to this junction in the year, and in folklore in general, this is actually the end of the year, but it's also the beginning of the year. So it's that important juncture. And we're always wondering, have we done well? What's going to happen in the future? And a lot of the divination, a lot of the ability to tell the future, people were fascinated about the future, and they often went to people who were wise. They weren't wise because necessarily they had the power of foresight. They were wise because they'd been around the block a few times. They knew what the different circumstances were. And often I'm interested in this concept witch because witch is a very negative term.
Negative
but if you think about the society in the past, if you couldn't go to the hospital, if you couldn't go to the doctor, if you couldn't go to, let's say, the undertaker and so on, you went to someone in your group and in your society who knew what the traditions were, who knew the knowledge, a different type of knowledge. And that's what we call the Banfassa, the wise woman.
Were they herbalists or were they just people who knew how to
they were herbalists.
utilise the surroundings and nature?
They knew everything about nature, they knew everything about herbs. I'm always interested. They tell us that Fleming invented penicillin. I can tell you long before in the Irish folk record, people were putting bits of mouldy bacon on people's cuts.
Really?
Oh yeah.
To draw out.
To offer the cure for whatever disease that was there, whatever infection that they had. So we had that in the folk tradition. People knew about the dandelion, they knew about nettles, they knew about. In fact, the entire folklore archive is replete with incredible herbal medicine.
These are all very, very positive things. So where did the negative
I think the negative comes in because I think in particular there are two groups in the society. One would be the church and one would be the doctors and the scientific
the church takes these as pagans, of course.
Yeah,
totally against what they
because in a way they were offering a different view of what you might call the supernatural. Okay, so whether we like it or not, the church looks after the supernatural. But these old wise women of the past, they were also involved in, because people wanted maybe a particular cure or a particular charm. So there were unusual things that they did as well. Like I always think about, the cure for mumps by all accounts was that you'd take a child who had mumps and pass them 3 times underneath a donkey that hadn't been ridden that morning. Now, there was always something magical. They were involved in magic, and the magic usually involved an unusual ritual at a particular time, a particular place, in particular circumstances.
3s and 7s appeared a lot, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah. There's all of that sort of idea there as well. But I always think of they were also involved in, let's say, if you wanted someone to fall in love with you. At Halloween now, we've been in lots of traditions about love divination, who your future husband might be, and so on and so forth. One of the amazing things was a thing called the Búrlach Bás, a kind of an extraordinary item.
The Búrlach Bás?
Yeah, the spancel of death. And what you did was you had to take a piece of skin from the top of someone's head, a dead person, right down to their heels. And if you had this particular Búrlach Bás, you could make anybody fall in love with you. You could put it around them, and once you did, that was the charm that was necessary. So we have extraordinary sort of charms.
Some charm.
No, there was always in magic, there was something negative might happen. So if you wanted something positive to happen, you used this magic, but it came back. Often the children of such a union might have been born with a birthmark or a band around them, or something. They might have had an infirmity of something of that sort. So the more you try to change nature by supernatural means, it'll come back and it'll hit you somewhere else.
And it was the lack of explanation to why these cures happened, I guess, that fear came as a result of that. And maybe, as you said, the church, whatever, they wanted the power. They didn't want anybody else to be able to
this was an
have
alternative
people
system.
follow them. It was alternative.
But think about it, people are still going to fortune tellers. Even in the present climate, people still want another angle on the
But you have to sometimes, even orthodox medicine is wonderful, but run parallel with herbal medicine or, non-conventional medicine, it's probably the best.
But there was also kind of a placebo effect. If you had an old woman who had a reputation in your locality for being, in acting cures, one of the things that you would actually do is you'd go to them, you'd feel good by the advice. She might have been giving you psychological advice. She might have been giving you, a different view.
If you heard what she said, may make you feel good, but if you heard something like this, you may not feel so good. Can we play that again, please? What is that?
Well, I know what that is.
What do people think it is?
Well, when people hear that, that's really the cry of the Banshee, who's a very important figure in Irish mythology. This is the solitary death messenger, the supernatural death messenger in Ireland, who comes as the foreboder of death, someone who announces the time of death or will predict death.
We actually have a drawing that we just had up there of a Banshee.
Do you believe in the Banshee?
Well, I tell you what, I once came across the Banshee like that, and I heard this.
Yeah.
I was living out the countryside. I grew up in the city, but when I moved to the countryside, I heard this noise. I got on my bicycle. I thought someone was being murdered, there was something going on. And I went out, I couldn't find where the noise was. But afterwards, it was explained to me, my neighbours, the farmers and so on, they all know that this is the vixen. This is the fox.
The female fox.
She's in heat, or she's calling her mate, or she's mating. But that's the sound.
Did somebody die on that occasion?
No.
Because my mother had the Banshee, right? And she was hanging, I swear to God, I'm not joking. She was hanging clothes inside the shed. She heard what was like a baby crying in the corner. It flew past her and went over our neighbour John Russell's house, right? My mother went down home that evening, and we had no telephone in the house, so somebody came in 20 mornings after dying, right? Which was my father's sister, who was born across the road. So my mother said, I heard the Banshee. Why did the Banshee fly over John Russell's house? John Russell was her godfather.
There you are. That's
But
great.
is this true? You
No, I
told me this
swear
before.
to God.
And your mother is not someone that would kind
No,
of is
she
into that type of
certainly
thing.
wouldn't be still saying it's true now if it was a joke. No, my mother got very, very frightened. She thought it was a child crying. She wasn't really too sure, and it kind of flew past her over John Russell's
There
house.
was the story just before I came out. I was telling some people that I was coming on, and one of my friends, Rachel, at work, she was saying that, somebody heard the Banshee, and it was well after somebody had died. It was a week afterwards. They said, that's wrong, she shouldn't be crying now. The next day, didn't that person's brother pass away?
It's too scary. Stop. There's the Banshee's comb. I don't think I should touch it. Tell me about this thing.
The Banshee's comb is something very, very
She's getting
interesting.
more scared today, well, no.
Probably the best story we have.
Am I supposed to do that, Maura?
Stop.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to do it. Oh my God.
Stop it.
I'm getting
You're
up.
so weird.
I'm going.
Do you know what? I don't know how I put up with you. Shame.
But the Banshee had long hair, and she was always combing her hair. Usually she was washing something in a lake or in a river, and she left down her comb, and somebody comes along and they pick it up, okay? And what happens, show me, I'll take it from you for a moment. And they go into the house, and when they go into the house, as soon as they go in, there is incredible rumpus and noise and thunder and lightning, and it's incredible inside, and they're absolutely terrified. What's going on? Somebody inside, the mother usually says, where did you get that? Where is this from? They said, that's the Banshee's comb. We can't have that. We must give it back to her. But they can't open the door and give it out to her. They need to use something like the tongs from the fire. And what they do is they take it, they open the window, they set it out, and when they do, the comb goes away, the Banshee goes. But when they come, the end of the tongs is either twisted or taken off completely. So it shows you can't touch the other world in that sense.
You can't, okay.
No, so
Shane, you're scared me half to death. Can we just see that photo of Shane's students who made that Banshees?
Oh yeah.
Let's do this.
These are the furniture design students in Cailleach and Banshee, and I gave them the brief. I said, lads, we want you to make a Banshee's comb. So it's, I think, the strangest they ever.
Shane, I'd love to sit here around a fireplace with you with like say like a hot rub or something like that, a drop in, seriously, and listen to these stories. We look forward to your next visit already. Thanks so much. Happy Halloween.
Happy New Year, really.
It is Happy New Year. Well, it is competition time for you.